It's time for James's Idiom of the Week.
All right, class, today we are going to take a look at the word disaster. And disaster is one of those words that usually is a negative term. In fact, almost always. I can't think of anything that's positive about a disaster. And there are, of course, many kinds of disasters. There are earthquakes, tsunamis, blizzards. That's where there's a lot of snow. Droughts, that's when there's no rain. And the opposite of drought would be a flood, where there's a lot of water. And then we, of course, have a hurricane and typhoon and tornado or twister. All right, so these are different kinds of natural disasters. And today we're going to take a look at some interesting idioms that we use with the word disaster. All right, let's take a look at number one. The first idiom, on the brink of disaster. On the brink of disaster. This means that something in your life or in your business or maybe even a sports game is going to fail very soon. So if you're watching the World Cup and you see something terrible happening in your soccer game, you might use this idiom, on the brink of disaster. Or you could say something like, I have only 50% in my English class. I'm on the brink of disaster. I must pass my next test. All that means you're going to fail soon. Something bad is happening soon. All right. Number two, a walking disaster. A walking disaster. This is to describe a person who is always in trouble or causing other people to always be in trouble. So, you could say, for example, John keeps coming late to class. The teacher is so angry and he forgets to do his homework. Man, he is a walking disaster. All right. Number three. Let's take a look at number three. A recipe for disaster. A recipe for disaster. This means that there is an action or some sort of event that is going to fail, and it will cause a very, very bad situation for everyone. For example, you might say, John is going to talk to his teacher about taking his test next week and not this week. And he says he can buy the teacher, some chocolate and flowers and a present, and she will help him. And you say, man, I think it's a recipe for disaster. All right, so all bad decisions being made there. All right, next one. A disaster waiting to happen. A disaster waiting to happen. Or sometimes we also say an accident waiting to happen. So this expression means that because of someone's behavior or perhaps a government's behavior, there's going to be something dangerous in the future. And we can see it. We can see that something bad is going to happen. For example, the bridge needs to be fixed. It's a disaster waiting to happen. If we don't fix the bridge, there's going to be a disaster. Last one. A disaster of epic proportions. A disaster of epic proportions. All right, practice that one. A disaster of epic proportions. It can mean a huge disaster, such as Fukushima, or it could be someone that is exaggerating something. Okay, for example, perhaps they did a very, very bad test, and or they've gotten very, very bad news, and I could say to them, "How was your test?" And you answer, "Man, it was a disaster of epic proportions." So it was a really bad test. I mean, not the end of the world, but a bad test. So he's exaggerating. It was a disaster of epic proportions. Or it can mean something literally, like a really, really bad disaster. Like, did you hear about the earthquake in California? Oh my God, it was a disaster of epic proportions. It was a really, really bad disaster. All right, so my students, don't be a walking disaster. If you don't study hard and practice your English every day, then that is a recipe for disaster, a disaster of epic proportions. And that is the idiom of the week.
Don't forget to follow James on Instagram at Connect with James for fun photos and updates on future episodes.